our program for today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I'm Melanie Fraser, the Executive Director of the Halton Hills Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you all for being here today. And we had a record number of questions that were sent. So I'm going to throw this over quickly to Elizabeth Kotz, who is our board chair with Tandia Financial, to introduce our panel. And then I'll go over some housekeeping notes for today. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Melanie. I wanted to start by thanking CN for the sponsorship of this event. CN unfortunately sends their regards for not being able to attend. I wanted to introduce our panel for today. So we have the Honourable Ted Arnott, and he has been the MPP for the Wellington Halton Hills since 1990 and is currently serving as Speaker of the Legislation Assembly of Ontario. We have His Worship, Mayor Rick Bonnette, a lifelong resident of Halton Hills. Rick Bonnette takes pride in having served the community as a mayor since 2003. And we have the Honourable Michael Chong, and he has been appointed MP for Wellington Halton Hills in 2004. He currently serves as the Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs for the official opposition. Gentlemen, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us here today. And I will turn it back to the meeting over to our Executive Director, Melanie Fraser.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. We have a few more doorbells to go. That'll be everybody sliding in at 1:30. Have you found that with the Zoom meetings? I just want to absolutely reiterate what Elizabeth said and echo. Michael, Ted, Mayor Rick, we understand how busy the three of you are, and so we're going to get right to it. I just want to go over some housekeeping notes for today. So if everybody can go ahead and just mute themselves right now, and that way we won't have any distractions. If you have any doubts on how to do that, you just hover over your picture and the little mute button should come up. I have asked for questions ahead of time. You are more than welcome to also put them into the chat window. We got a lot of questions that were very similar in nature, so I may take some of your questions and condense them. And then, you know, one last note is we are so lucky to have really great representatives from our government here. And so we want to make sure that any dialogue that we're having today is respectful and productive in manner. So, and then one final note, I just want to remind everybody that your TV Cogeco is recording this to amplify the Halton Hills message. And we're very grateful to them for doing that. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the questions. So Ted, you might guess that you've got a few with what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to condense what a few of the most important ones that came across were. And essentially it was from a lot of our small businesses that are here on the call today that have been shut down for an inordinate amount of time. And what their sense is, and what we're seeing in the news is that there's no science backing it up. So, you know, I see Jen Budgeton on the call who owns Cartwheels. I see Julia who owns Strictly Dance. We've got lots of local businesses that don't feel that they are being treated fairly. And quite frankly, they are feeling like no one is advocating for them. So I'm curious to hear from you on that. And in this, I know you can't maybe talk about timelines, but can you talk about what other government support might be available to these businesses? And what does the summer look like for them? You know, I know Jen relies on summer camps for a large part of her income. And I think we're just all at a point 400 days in of wondering when we're going to see some answers.
Well, thanks a lot, Melanie. First of all, I want to express my appreciation to you and the Halton Hills Chamber of Commerce for leading this meeting and this opportunity for me to hear from your members about the challenges that they're facing. And I know there are opportunities out there if we work towards them, and we have to try. But certainly the provincial government's role in terms of supporting small business through the most difficult time that I can remember in my lifetime has been at times significant, but there are gaps. There's no question about it. And we continue to hear from small businesses here at our riding office as to where the support program gaps exist, and we're certainly trying to advocate for them too, as I know that the chambers of commerce are doing and what you're doing too. The government continues to maintain that its decisions are based upon science and the recommendations and advice that are presented by the various tables, they call them, the science table, the health table. There are literally dozens of public health officials, epidemiologists, professionals on these committees that are providing hopefully a consensus position to the government, but it's not always that easy, and science seems to continue to evolve on this. But it's the government that makes the final decisions, clearly, and in most cases for the provincial government's decisions are obviously subject to scrutiny in the legislature and in the media. And there's been a lot of criticism, and some of it, of course, absolutely valid. I would never sit here and argue that the response to the provincial government's been perfect. I would never suggest that I'm perfect. I have lots of things I need to work on. I think we all need to do better every day, but people are doing their best, and there are people working around the clock, not just the elected officials, but in many cases the public servants in the ministries who are moving heaven and earth to develop programs much more quickly than they otherwise would be. I would say again, if individual business people in Halton Hills or throughout our riding want to approach me directly with their specific questions and concerns, I'd be happy to hear them. I would want to do what I can to help. As I said, my staff are still working, but they're working remotely, and we are trying to keep up with everything that's coming in the door. I'll add that the Ontario legislature has been sitting this year since February, as we normally would, and we sit 4 days a week, as we normally have. There's fewer members in the House because of the need for social distancing in the chamber. But as Speaker, I have to be there. I'm there every day, working with members on both sides of the House, actually, to try to advocate for our interests and to support our constituents. I agree that people are they're looking for some degree of certainty, some sort of sense of when we're through this. I don't know that anybody has question other than I think there's a number of positive developments, especially in terms of the number of people who have received vaccines now, over 40% of Ontario adults. We're expecting and anticipating a very large shipment of vaccines coming to Canada in the month of May, and they have a target to get as many, as the expression goes, jabs in arms as they can over the month of May. When we have approximately 70 to 75% of our population vaccinated, the belief is that we'll hit a significant turning point towards getting back to something like normal. The current stay-at-home order for the province is still about, goes to the 20th, I think, the 19th to the 20th of this month, and it seemed interminable, really. And I know for a lot of people, it's the days are dragging on in some respects. Harder in April than perhaps ever before. But the government will have to make a decision then towards the end of the existing stay-at-home order, whether or not it's extended or whether or not it's sufficient. And that'll be based on, again, the numbers of new infections, the numbers of people being hospitalized across the province, the capacity of our ICU units, the percentage of tests that are coming back positive. All of these factors are taken into consideration before the government makes another big decision like that. But I believe we've made significant progress in the spring, as much as it feels like to me, and I think to people I'm talking to a lot on my Friday calls. People are at a new point in their ability to cope. And they really are looking for some degree of certainty. Like, will we be out of this by the summer? Will we be out of it by the fall? My fervent hope is that by the summer, things are looking very different and we're much more back to normal. And my belief and hope is by the fall, we will be. But again, to sit here and make a guarantee, I can't do that in good conscience. I don't have the ability or the information upon which to make that statement. But this has been a long-winded answer, and I apologize for that. I'm maybe rambling a bit, but we've come a long way. We've come this far, and my belief and hope is that we're getting there, and we're getting close to when we can see a big difference and a much more sort of a back to normal feel to our lives.
So Ted, thanks for that. I guess as a follow-up to that, I would ask, if you look at the province of Saskatchewan, they've released a 3-step program as to what businesses and the community can expect when it comes to reopening, and more importantly, what metrics we need to reach in order to get to those. And I think that that's really all that business is looking for. We understand that, you know, you can't give a definitive date. We understand that these things are out of, you know, the government's control. But I think that people are looking for a plan. So if anything, I would ask you on behalf of the business community to take back to the government and to your colleagues that we all have to plan our businesses. We have to hire people. We have to, you know, buy stock. We have to do all kinds of things. So we're just asking for the same from the government as to what metrics would be in place in order to see a reopening. And if that's a percentage of vaccinated people, then that's fine. But I think that's really the big issue is no one knows.
Yeah.
There doesn't feel like there's a plan in place.
Melanie, I really appreciate that suggestion. And the Saskatchewan plan, I'm sure that's on a website for the government of Saskatchewan. The provinces, I believe, are coordinating to some degree their efforts. They should be, certainly, and monitoring what each other's doing, and hopefully looking at best practices that are working from one province and adopting them in another. So if Saskatchewan has a better plan than the province of Ontario, then it's up to Ontario to find a way to adopt something similar, something better. That should be the goal, the objective. And I appreciate the suggestion. I'll see what I can do to pass that on.
Great, thank you. Hi, Michael, great to see you. We haven't seen you in so long. You've been busy in the news a ton. So congratulations on your appointment. So this question might be for both Ted and Michael. You know, we're at the stage where businesses are hoping to revamp and to start hiring again. But what we're hearing from our businesses is that there really isn't a lot of encouragement to get unemployed people back to work, especially with the various government programs out there, which we all acknowledge were needed at the time. But I know we've got lots of member businesses that are finding it impossible to hire anybody at a certain price point. And as a result, they're not able to expand their businesses and to get ready for new business. So I'm curious to hear from you, Michael, what your thoughts are on that and what you see of any potential solutions.
Well, thank you, Melanie, and thank you to the Chamber for having me here. It's great to be here with MPP Ted Arnott and Mayor Rick Bonnette. I look forward to seeing you again in person one day at an event instead of doing this over Zoom. And it's great to see so many people, so many friends and familiar faces on the call today. So thank you for organizing this. To answer your question, the federal government just released its budget, the first budget in 2 years. And our view is that the budget does not come forward with measures to address the problem that we have, which is that hundreds of thousands of Canadians are still out of work. Millions more are underemployed and are still suffering the after effects of the economic fallout of this pandemic. And I know, look, I'm in opposition, and you know, some people will say, well, you're just saying that as an opposition member. So let me just quote some Liberals who have been critical of the budget in the last 2 weeks. David Dodge is the former Deputy Minister of Finance under the government of Jean Chrétien, who did the tough work of getting Canada's finances back on track in the 1990s. He subsequently was governor of the Bank of Canada. He said in the Globe last week that the budget does not focus on growth. He said that over the longer haul, we face a very real challenge. And I don't think the government tried to seriously address that in the budget. The serious challenge he's referring to is a lack of economic growth, a lack of job creation. And he criticized the budget for not being a prudent fiscal plan. Robert Asselin, who actually worked for Bill Morneau, the finance minister, before he left for other climes, Robert Asselin wrote just last week very similar criticism. and pointed out that, I'll just quote what he said. I have a quote here actually that I jotted down. After doubling our federal debt in only 6 years and spending close to $1 trillion, not moving the needle on long-term growth would be the worst possible legacy of this budget. That's not coming from me. That's coming from reputable people who have worked in finance, who have supported the current government. So unfortunately, the budget, while it provides for a lot of new spending, it's not in the right areas. It's not on investment to create jobs and growth. It's rather on consumption. And that is why we've been quite critical of the budget and why we continue to call on the government to do it differently and introduce different measures to create a climate for business investment, for job growth, and for job creation. The other criticism of the budget is that it does nothing to address one of the big challenges in Halton Hills, which is the runaway price of housing. And it does nothing to cool the housing market, no measures in the budget to cool the housing market, which we think is critical if we're going to ensure that housing remains in reach of ordinary families. And so that's another challenge that we see in the budget. The final thing that we're quite worried about is that the federal debt has doubled in the last 5 years. And interest payments on the debt are about to skyrocket. In fact, on the government's own prediction, interest payments will rise from $20 billion a year today to $40 billion by 2025. That's a doubling of interest charges in 5 short years. And that's assuming that we don't get inflation. And we've all been hearing issues. Dean Wood pointed out in the pre-chat that there's cargo container shortages. We're seeing skyrocketing prices of basic commodities. If we get inflation, those interest charges will go a lot higher than that. And so that's our final criticism of the fiscal plan that the government's laid out recently. Thank you for the question.
That's the most 2021 moment I've had all year. I was muted. Ted, can you shed some light on, I know there have been some programs announced by Minister McNaughton. Can you shed some light on how those might be able to help our small businesses in Halton Hills?
Well, yeah, and Mike spoke about the federal budget. Thanks, Mike, for that analysis. The provincial budget was presented on March the 24th, and it's all available online, the information. There's a small business support grant that the provincial government talks about frequently, which eligible small businesses can receive $20,000 through. There's an Ontario Main Street PPE grant, and there's property tax and energy cost rebates as well. Is it enough? It'll help some. It probably doesn't help enough, but at the same time, it's some, I think, substantial tangible assistance for many small businesses. But Melanie, you mentioned the need for opportunities for people to, well, we have a high unemployment rate. We have businesses that want to hire. We need to find a way to ensure that the government links those two together and creates a solution out of two problems. And there was a bill presented in the House this week that I think is very interesting. You mentioned Monty McNaughton, the Minister of Labor, Training and Skills Development. And it's a bill to make it easier to support the skilled trades in the province of Ontario. That's going to be debated extensively next week. I haven't seen the bill yet. It was just presented in the House, but I hope to be briefed on it next week, and that debate will continue. But because it's a government bill, it will most likely pass. And the government is, I think, sincerely committed to making it easier for young people to get into the skilled trades and ensuring that we have an adequate number of people who are in those programs as apprentices, and that jobs that are available are full and filled by our young people. So that's certainly the goal. The expectation. The bill is intended to support that and make it easier, make it happen.
Okay, Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Bonnette. Great to see you in kind of in person. Thank you for joining us today. I think when Michael was talking about affordable housing, that segues perfectly into some questions that we had from our members that are more municipally geared. So we had some questions specifically on what the progress on the McGibbon Hotel is and when we might see some action on that corner. And maybe on top of that, if you could talk to us about the regional growth plan for Halton and what council's position is on growth requirements through to 2051.
Well, first of all, good afternoon. And it's nice to see so many people here on a Friday afternoon, but it's not kind of overcast and you can't go golfing. The golf courses are closed, so we're here. And so I would like to welcome Mike and Ted. It'd be nice when we see one another in person. We'd be getting ready for the Highland Games, the ALS walk, and already those types of things would be happening. I'd like to also welcome Damon Soblowski, as well as Graham Lowe from the town of Halton Hills, serve with the ECDEV. So the McGibbon Hotel, 2 years ago, the finances fell through for the McGibbon Hotel. So now we have new owners, and the new ownership team is very solvent. They are the same ones that are building the building at the old Memorial Arena. It's doing that development. So they have a new plan, and the new plan is still 10 stories, but they're going to have a lot more units. The original, I believe, was 123, and I think they're going up to 145 units. So they're going to be smaller units. So we had a public meeting on it. It was held in October, and at that time, staff had indicated that we required some updates on the package. What's the building going to look like? There are some issues with the parking, because now they're going to have 145 units compared to originally 120. So parking, where they're going to get the parking. They need to provide greater detail of some of the civil engineering components of the building. And so we're waiting for them. And they did tell us this is May 7th. They said we will have the new drawings by the end of May. So the original McGibbon was approved by council. And like I said, the finances went through. So now they're changing it. I don't think, I mean, as long as they don't take away the original, like, the historical part, the bricks, etc. I don't think it'll be an issue for council. Council wants to see this to go ahead. I want to see it to go ahead because it'd be a very vibrant for downtown Georgetown. And I supported it in the past, and I'll be supporting it again. Unless the building comes out and made out of plastic or something ridiculous, I don't see an issue with this being supported. With respect to the growth plan, this is a very interesting one because the growth plan, it's, and I have great difficulty with this. And I'll tell you why, because the Liberals, when they came in, they came up with a places to go plan. And I can remember, Ted, you and I drove you all around to say what my concerns were. I don't like being dictated by the province, and because otherwise the municipalities, we did our own growth plans. And the Georgetown South, remember Georgetown was only 7,000 population in the 60s. And now Georgetown South, Georgetown as a whole, now it's around 45,000. And Georgetown South was all done by the town of Halton Hills. We didn't have the province telling us that we got to grow. So now to bring us up to the latest plan, and it is a struggle because the government, and I'm not bringing Ted into this because he's the speaker. He's not part of that. He's not from the ministry, but he has passed my concerns along in council. So I thank Ted for doing that. We have to put we have a growth plan that council approved till 2031, and that's Vision Georgetown. And that's to bring us up 20,000 population, roughly 20,000. Then the province says, you got to bring it up to 2041. Well, now the province has told us, we got a plan for 2051 And we have to have that all packaged up by next May. Like, what is the rush? And, we don't know what all, we don't know where we're going to be. We don't know what designs of houses are going to be and all kinds of different. So we have great issues. So we're under the gun. So where we are, there's 4 concepts. And then Councillor Fogel wanted to see a 5th concept, which would be no industrial commercial and no expanding of the urban boundary. So we supported it. I supported it just to take a look. But will it go? We know for a fact the hospital, they announced the other day, and I've known for some time, they'll be looking at building a new hospital. The hospital on the site that we have now is aged. It's built in 1961. And it's, and even COVID shares that you get people in hospitals today. It's not like when we were younger and you'd have 4 beds in one room. It'd be like more individual beds, etc., in case another pandemic comes down the road. It's more prepared. So they're looking at 45 acres. So we don't have 45 acres in urban boundary anywhere. So we're going to have to expand somewhere because there's no free lunch. So we'll probably end up expanding the urban boundary. So I just want to give you a bit of background. So where it's at, we had a public meeting the other day, Zoom meeting, and that's another issue that I have. And I wrote the government, wrote Premier for it. Why are you rushing this? We're in the middle of a pandemic. When we went to the last growth plan in 2009 or so, I can remember Christ the King School. We had to hold a council meeting there, and we had over 300 people out to it. Then we had a workshop at Gellert. We had 150 people. The Zoom meeting we had the other day, and I don't know if any members of the chamber were even there. If there's another one, I would urge you to, come out and speak, etc. But we only had about 30-some people. Even outside developers were there as well. So bottom line is we have to provide, town council we're going to provide Halton Region our position to regional growth concepts by mid-July. So there's lots of time to, to put opinions in, etc. But council has not arrived at any formal position regarding the regional growth plan. And
Okay.
that's where it is for now on those 2 issues.
That sounds great. Thank you for that update. I want to let all of the chamber members know that the board, the chamber board is considering all the regional proposals as well for the different levels of growth. So we will be considering that at the board level and then maybe putting it out to you for some feedback. So I want to say there are a million questions in the chat here, and thank you to all of you who have responded specifically for things that we can take care of. So Michael, I see that you put the conservative fiscal plan in federally there, and Ted, I think you've answered a few questions here as well. Ted, we've gotten quite a few questions on what the provincial government, I know you referenced that, there is obviously there are scientific advisors and whatnot, but the prevailing feeling is, whether you're in business or whether you're a parent, is that science isn't pointing to outside activities being Mayor Bonnette, I think you're muted, so I'm going to mute you there because I think you've got a little bit of an echo. So, all of us that are parents and educators are worried about our kids' health and our kids' mental health, and I think that's a lot of the malaise that we're feeling in society in general. Is that the kids really aren't. I know we're trying to keep them safe, but I think people are feeling that we're not considering their overall mental health. So. If you can speak to that, I know it's tough for you because, the overall government message is different. But what would your opinions be on, or what can you tell us about, kids being maybe allowed outside for sports, or I think there's a few golfers on here, so there might be some grownups here who want to be allowed out too.
Well, again, the current state of, or stay-at-home order, I should say, is in effect until the 19th or 20th of this month. And I believe there will be a revisiting of the whole thing, probably 3 or 4 days before the current stay-at-home order ends, and there'll be a decision as to whether or not it's extended or whether or not it ends. And I think everybody's hope is that the numbers are down to the extent that we can end the stay-at-home order. And then a lot of these things may very well be possible within a couple of weeks, if we can just get there. The Minister of Health has been asked this very question in the House on several occasions. And I think the public health consensus is, if we are outside, we are less likely to be at risk of contracting COVID-19 than if we're inside, as a general principle. But what they're concerned about in terms of outdoor activities is, to the extent that people are gathering, to the extent that people are close together, to the extent that people are getting together socially, what are they doing in addition to perhaps the round of golf? And to what extent will that cause greater spread of COVID-19? And it is the belief of the Minister of Health, certainly, and I think supported by many of her top advisors, including the Chief Medical Officer of Health, that that is totally inconsistent with the stay-at-home order. The stay-at-home order is to encourage people to do what it says: stay at home unless they have to go out for an essential reason. And I believe that's the rationale for the decision. Whether or not people agree with it, I'm sure that's something that people would talk about and debate. But I'm just telling you, this is what the minister believes based on my understanding from what she said in the House. And as I say, I think we have to, well, we have no choice, I guess, right now, but to accept some of these restrictions, unless we're going to defy them and perhaps subject ourselves and others to the risk of spreading COVID-19. So I'm not recommending that. But what we also can do is look to the future with some degree of hope and optimism that this is temporary and we are going to get through it. And there will come a day, hopefully, when we can resume our normal recreational activities, hopefully still this summer. I certainly hope that that's the case. And I believe that it may very well be possible. Oh, I should mention mental health. Can I touch on that? Yeah. The government is very well aware of the mental health issues that the restrictions have caused amongst, I think all of us, with probably without exception, have experienced mental health difficulties over the last 12 to 14 months. If we're honest with ourselves, I think because of what we've encountered and experienced, but at the same time, we've gotten through it this far. I think all of us have learned probably what we're capable of in terms of resilience, and our ability to cope with this has been enhanced because we've had to find ways to deal with it and carry on our lives. The government has to, I believe, make an effort to enhance access to mental health services, and I believe they've done that. The Canadian Mental Health Association and other agencies have a lot of good information online that I think a lot of people are accessing, and that helps too. But it is a huge challenge, and sometimes I'm asked, is there any cost-benefit analysis of the restrictions? Has there any cost-benefit analysis been done? Because there are a lot of mental health issues associated with the restrictions, no question about it. But I think the government has by necessity had to prioritize the COVID-19 health issue first to ensure that the hospitals weren't. That's why they've done it. It's not to say that it hasn't created other problems. It has, but we have to confront them one by one. And lastly, I just say, as we deal with our mental health challenges as individuals, we have to be cognizant of the challenges that others who are close to us are facing, and we need to be there for each other and support each other too. It's not just the government. I think we all have a part and a role to play in terms of supporting each other in our immediate circle and in our communities.
Absolutely. And shop local, right? That's the main thing. So yeah, I'll tell you in the chat, I think people are just overall frustrated with the seemingly you know, I think a lot of people felt that there wasn't a great hospital plan in place. You know, unfortunately, years of cuts have led to this. You know, we look to the states and we see that they are at very similar numbers as we are and much more open. And it's because they have the hospital capacity that we don't have. So I am with you. I agree that more vaccinations, hopefully we'll see our businesses open up and you know, I think the fear though is that what if we don't get there? You know, so what's the plan then? If we don't get to 75% vaccinated, do we just shut our businesses down for the next 4 years until the next pandemic rolls around? And I know you don't have an answer for that. You know, I'm just trying to express that our businesses are massively frustrated because they just, you know, they just want to contribute.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on to our next fun topic, which, Michael, this is right up your alley. So we've had lots of people want to talk to you about China, and you know, the influence that China is exerting in maybe not so great of a way in the world theater of politics and business. So we've had some people ask, you know, how can we push back against these bullying tactics that China is imposing on us, and what your views are on that.
Well, thank you for the questions. Thank you for the question, Melanie. First, it must be said that obviously we are all appalled at the anti-Asian hate and discrimination that we've seen in the last year. That is completely unacceptable. You know, while Canada has made and Canadians have made tremendous progress in recent decades in treating all Canadians fairly, regardless of their race, religion, or creed. Clearly, we have more work to do. And so I think that's an important thing to note because many of our fellow citizens have been targeted with abuse online, in person. They've been assaulted, spit on, simply for being of Asian heritage, and that is unacceptable. That said, I think it's completely fair game to criticize the Chinese Communist leadership in the way they've treated Canadians and Canadian companies in recent years. I think our quarrel, our criticism is not with the Chinese people, it's with their leadership, with the government of China. And it's clear that China is a threat, not just to Canada, but is increasingly a threat to other similarly sized countries. They have been threatening citizens, economic interests, and the values of countries like Canada, Australia, India, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Sweden. You can go through the list of countries. We are not the only country that has been subject to their threats. We have to take a stronger stand. We believe that the Canadian government needs to take a much stronger stand in response to these threats. We also believe that Canada needs to act much more multilaterally in concert with democratic allies like Australia and the United States and Japan to counter these threats. Specifically, we believe that we need to withdraw from the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. We're contributing hundreds of millions of Canadian tax dollars to that bank, and we are participating in that bank's governance. We believe that Canada should suspend payments to the bank and announce its withdrawal from the bank because we think it's a nefarious way for the Chinese government and Beijing to export its authoritarian model of influence and governance throughout the Indo-Pacific region. The other thing we think we need to do is we need to ban the import of Chinese tomatoes and cotton. There is lots of evidence that some 12 million Uyghur Muslims in Western China are being forced through a state-run scheme in slave-like conditions to pick cotton and produce tomatoes. This is a violation of international law to begin with, but yet those products continue to be imported into Canada. In fact, you go on Amazon.ca or eBay.ca, you can continue to purchase these products from these locations in China. We think that's unacceptable. The government needs to introduce an immediate ban on the importation of these products, work with universities like the University of Guelph to provide the Canada Border Services agencies with the tools to track the provenance of these products to ensure that we are not importing products that have been produced using slave or forced labor. We think we need to work more closely with allies in the Indo-Pacific region, join with India, Japan, and Australia, and the United States in the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which is an emerging group in Indo-Pacific that is working to counter some of these threats. And finally, we think we need to ban Huawei from the rollout of Canada's next generation telecommunications infrastructure. It's clearly a threat to our national security, and it's a threat through the theft of our intellectual property. The government, to that end, should not only ban it from constructing the core of this infrastructure, but it should also advise universities like the University of Toronto from entering into partnerships with Huawei and issue a directive to the federal guaranteeing councils to ban federal money from being used in partnership with this company, which is under obligation under Chinese law to cooperate with China's intelligence and security gathering services. So those are some of the measures that we are calling on the government to do that we think will protect Canadian interests and Canadian citizens, both now and in the future. Thank you for the question.
We could probably have a full hour on just what's going on outside of the COVID world, and maybe we will one of these days for sure. I'm sure Ted would enjoy that. Mayor Bonnette, a quick question for you. In the chat here, someone is asking about the, I know this is Halton region, but about the vaccine eligibility for Halton region and when we think that that's going to fully open up. I know that they've said 18 plus starting by the end of the month. So if you or and I can certainly get that information to you, Mark, at the end of it, if the mayor doesn't have it right at his fingertips.
Yeah, I don't have, thank you for the question. I don't have that on my fingertips, but I know they are opening it up to 18. As a matter of fact, yesterday, I had a meeting with Christine Elliott and the small urban mayors, and we issued a statement actually asking the province to look at 15 and up, because we have people, young people that are working through drive-throughs, that are working in grocery stores that can get the COVID. And I know of the fact that there's 2 16-year-olds in Acton that have received it. And when you think about the drive-throughs, when you think about the grocery stores, they're getting 1,000 people a day coming in. And if you're going to try to start up school, starting up school in the fall, however they do it, and kids are going to hang around each other. They've asked that that get reduced, and we issued a statement to it yesterday. The minister did say yesterday that the goal for the province is to get 65% by the end of May, getting the vaccines. And to me, that's good news. And when I met with her a month ago, she said that we would have 40% by the end of April, and they met that target. So now that's jumping up. That's just a point of interest. Halton Hills at the Gellert Center, we've been going strong for at least, we started ahead of anywhere in the region getting inoculations. They started with the Gellert. We started off with 70 cases a day, went to 90. For the last 3 weeks, there's over 340, average 340 a day, 7 days a week at the Gellert Center. They may be opening up when they, as the new cases come up, they are seriously looking at opening up one at the Acton Arena as well, because we don't want long lineups. We want people to get in, and those who had the shots, you can tell it's very well organized at the Gellert. So right now it is 18 and up, but still there's some gaps. But again, anybody can go to the pharmacies, and there's more pharmacies opening up to get their shots.
Melanie, if I could.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah,
Michael, yeah, please go ahead.
If I could build on what Mayor Bonnette said, I, empathize with the situation that the provincial government is in, and I think the town of Halton Hills and the region of Halton have done a tremendous job in vaccinating local residents. The key issue here that I want people to be aware of is that we do not have enough vaccines. I mean, look, the fact of the matter is this. We are in a third wave and in a third set of restrictions and lockdowns because we have not been able to achieve a sufficient level of vaccination to achieve a certain level of herd immunity. And that is not the provincial government's fault. And it's not the town of Halton Hills' fault, and it's not the region of Halton's fault. They have all done tremendous work in trying to roll out this vaccination campaign. It is the federal government's fault for having failed to secure sufficient quantities of vaccines to get people vaccinated. The fact of the matter is this, that in the United Kingdom, close to 60% of people have been vaccinated. In the United States, they're approaching 50%. We are less than half of what the UK has done. And as a result, we are going through this third wave and third round of restrictions. And they are not. And that's why you're seeing images on social media of them reopening and people getting together again without masks and their economy starting to really rocket ahead. Halton Region issued a series of infographics this week that I think are quite telling. And they said, and I'll quote, while we have the capacity to book approximately 7,200 appointments per day through our clinics, the availability of consistent vaccine supply continues to constrain the vaccination program rollout. Halton Region last month in April could have vaccinated 216,000 residents. They only vaccinated 90,000. Less than half what they could have. And that's not the province of Ontario's fault. That is the federal government's fault. We do not have enough vaccines. And Halton Region has said that in the next month, this month of May, that they're only going to be able to vaccinate at half the rate they could. Instead of vaccinating over last month and this month, some 432,000 residents, which is almost the entire population of the region, we will have instead only vaccinated 180,000. And that's why we're in this situation we are in today. The federal government did not get enough vaccines. And so everything else flows from that. We cannot have an economic reopening without sufficient levels of vaccines. And so ultimately, the buck stops with the federal government for one simple reason. In the Constitution, the Peace, Order, and Good Government Clause gives the emergency powers for a health emergency like this to the federal government. Early on in the pandemic, the federal government made a decision to punt 90% of the responsibility of this to the 10 provinces who have been struggling to try to manage what is really a national emergency. The federal government had two responsibilities, one of which I concede they've done quite well on. The other, they've completely fallen down on. The first responsibility was to hand out emergency benefits in order to help people who've been laid off or put out of work. They haven't been perfect in doing that, but we supported much of what they've done because we think it's been necessary and think it has helped. The second thing they had to do, and that's pretty much the only thing they had to do, was to secure sufficient dosages of vaccine, something they have utterly failed to do. And that's why we're in this predicament when everybody else seems to be reopening up south of the border and in the UK and Israel and other places like that. Thank you.
So I have Mr. Mayor, I do have a question for you about what the town is doing to promote and attract new business for the downtown Acton and Georgetown BIA areas.
Thank you very much for the question. And I want to make a comment earlier to Michael, and that is thank you for your comments on the interest rates and affordable housing, because I do have a Zoom meeting with the Prime Minister at 3 o'clock. So I'll be conveying that message to the Prime Minister at 3 o'clock. So going back to what are we doing to promote, I'd like to tell you personally that I have written a letter to help Cartwheels out under the lockdown, and I know that they've had issues and not allowing more than 10 people. And that was even before this third wave came. Just recently, I wrote the Premier, just not on golf courses and tennis courts and pickleball, but also in small businesses. I still don't know what the issue is, and I can't go into these small stores in the downtown and just one person at a time rather than curb pickup. I feel safer going into a small store than going into Walmart per se, or even going to a grocery store. And I think that's very difficult. I wrote the Premier on April the 20th, and I know it's about science, but I quoted two scientists, and one is from Ashley Toots, who's an epidemiologist at the University of Toronto, and they're saying closing all these outside places is not the answer. And Isaac Bogosh who many of you have heard, he's on every radio and TV station. He came out and said the same thing. People should be outdoors. So I asked about the patios. And so here's what the town's, so I'll tell you what the town's doing. Business retention is very important. And we've worked with and with the BIAs. We have a support and recovery task force. We've had al fresco all ready to, and al fresco, these are the temporary patio program to help supplement local restaurants. So people like Hungry Hollow don't have their own patio, they can have an outdoor patio. So once we can open up, that'll be going. We've launched the new Visit Halton Hills website to amplify the tourism and local benefits. So eventually, when the stay-at-home gets lifted, that'll help businesses. We coordinated with the BIA levy reduction program on their fees. We're supporting the expansion of online and e-commerce, and this is very important. And that's where, so far, we have 67 businesses by administrating the digital Main Street program, and 3 local businesses were approved for $2,500 grant so that they can get doing digital. So a lot of these, so they can get the curbside pickup. Because I still don't know if that's the answer myself. I'm a browser. I like to go in the store and browse, touch things and say, that's what I want to take home. I'm going to buy this now. So still difficult to do curbside within small businesses. So we have a lot of highlights. We've just issued our 5-year economic program just on Monday. You can visit Halton Hills, hang on, I'll get it, business. Invest in Halton Hills, and that's on our town website, and you can get all up to date that we can. I know some of you might think $2,500 is a lot of money, but when you take that from so many businesses applying, it adds up as far as the town rates go. So we're trying to do our best, and we've because we recognize the long-term health of a community is very important. And you know, the BIAs, I mean, they're the first thing you see when you go into any community. That's like the heart of a community. You see a lot of boarded up stores or closed stores. It doesn't go well. I do know there's 3 new restaurants that are opening up in Acton. And well, one's a takeout of frozen foods, but 2 more restaurants are opening up in Acton. And so there's still confidence there with people in investing. There's still a lot of confidence. And I've encouraged the takeout Wednesdays or takeout, orders to help our local restaurants. And I've been doing it since the start. And so these, and plus we relaunched our renewed Shop Local campaign. So we're doing as much as we can and advocating on behalf of businesses on different things to the provincial government.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I'm sure everyone has seen the extra ad, the gum ad, where everybody breaks out of their Zoom meetings and they run towards their downtown because they're so glad to be out of the pandemic. So I think that'll be the first chamber meeting we have when we get to see each other all in person again. Michael, do you have time for a quick question before, and Mayor Bonnette, I think everyone wants to come on that call with you with the Prime Minister. I think we have some things to pass along. But Michael, I have one quick question for you regarding taxes. I know that's never a quick question, but maybe we can highlight on it and then we can follow up later. But I did get some questions about any changes that you foresee in the future regarding capital gains, wealth tax, inheritance tax, that type of thing.
Well, thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. And this is for Mayor Bonnette's information as well. The government did announce a new tax in the budget, but doesn't apply to any of us. It's on foreign non-resident nationals, foreign nationals who are non-resident of Canada. So there's going to be a 1% tax on non-residential, sorry, a 1% tax on residential real estate owned by non-resident foreign nationals. So that is a new tax that's coming in. Frankly, I don't think it's going to do anything to cool the housing market. Anybody who's got the money to buy a second or third property here in Canada is not going to pay much attention to a 1% tax. Generally, in addition, but I think that the question is more about whether or not there's going to be increases to tax to pay for all these deficits and debt. At this point, no. But look, the bill is coming, and there's only two ways out of this predicament that we are in. It is either to grow the economy that will then naturally produce the revenues the government needs to balance the books, or to increase taxes. And so our criticism of the current government's plan is that because it isn't a pro-growth budget that attracts foreign investment, that attracts domestic investment, that will create jobs and growth, we're not going to be producing the revenues we need over the next 5 years to balance the books. And as a result, increases the risk of tax increases coming down the pipe. And I'll just close by saying this. We are in a very, very serious financial situation here that I don't think is getting enough attention from bank economists. I'll give you one example. Newfoundland is at the edge of bankruptcy. Last March, a year ago, March, Newfoundland effectively went bankrupt. They did not have 48 hours cash, beyond 48 hours cash, to pay for doctors, nurses, the lights, hospitals. They didn't have the cash. They had, the premier of the day had to call up the Prime Minister's office and say, we are running out of cash to pay for basic services like hospitals to keep the lights on. We need your help. So the federal government stepped in and made an emergency decision to essentially loan money by purchasing Government of Newfoundland bonds to save Newfoundland at that point in time. They are not in a crisis right now, but Moya Greene, who's the former president of Canada Post and who later went on to head up the UK Royal Mail system, is reported today in the Globe and Mail. And the headline is very, very concerning. And I'll just quote the headline. The headline says, report urges Newfoundland and Labrador to hike taxes and curb public spending to avoid bankruptcy. Newfoundland is not the only province in this situation, and neither is the federal government. We have got to get our fiscal house in order in the next 4 years, or we're going to be facing some pretty serious challenges. And that is a role the federal government should be playing right now and is not. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. You know, it's interesting, when you talked about Newfoundland, the first thing that struck me was that a lot of our businesses on this call and in our community, that's exactly how they're feeling right now. They are literally on the edge, and they don't know how they're going to pay for, you know, the next 1, 2, 3, 4 months of what's to come. So I want to thank the three of you for coming. I know that it's tough to hear some, you know, not so great news sometimes. Everyone's on edge. I know that. But I believe in this community. I believe in Halton Hills. I think that we will come out of this stronger because we support each other. And we are all very lucky to have Ted, Michael, and Rick, you at the helm, because you do care so much about this community and it shows. And so we're very grateful, even if we don't always agree. So what I will say to everyone on the call is we have captured all of the comments in the chat that may not have been directly asked, and we will forward them to the appropriate office that is on the call so that you can get your answers. And then what we're going to do is we'll put a recording of this on the chamber website as well. And if we have any specific questions that we can share, like when the vaccination schedule and things like that, we will share that on our website as well. So I just want to be respectful. We've all got some places to be, not a golf course, right, Ted? But I just want to thank you all so much for being here, and hopefully next time we see each other, it will be in person. So thanks everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thanks again.